Yeah, so good morning again, and welcome to our South Waikato Business Support webinar series. This is number 6, so hard to believe, we're already at number 6, and very soon we'll be at probably 8 and then 10. But the topic today, of course, is ways to grow your revenue. But before I get into that, I just want to acknowledge and thank, of course, the South Waikato Investment Fund Trust and the South Waikato District Council, both of them for supporting these and making these possible. Particularly Francis and Paul, those respective organisations have been very proactive. Just a reminder, you can ask questions at any time. It looks like we've got a small group on today. So if you want, you can just simply wave at me, or wave at us, or ask questions using the chat function, which you can find down on your toolbar. And so you can just click on that and type questions either to the group, or you can send a question to one of us. Rachel's going to keep an eye on them, and you can just ask one anonymously in that regard if you so wish. So it's entirely up to you. So wave at us, take yourself off a microphone, or use the chat. We are videoing this, so don't worry if you miss something because I've gone too fast, or you want something explained in more detail. You can access that at a later stage. And in fact, all of our past ones are all still available on video as well. And Rachel tells me that people are watching them, which is great. And so we'll add this one to the mix as well. I'm going to be using slides today. I did think about just talking my way through this, but I realized that it'd be more effective to go through some of the concepts I'm going to talk about in a slide form. But again, we'll make these available as well in a PDF format, so you can review them again at your own leisure. So don't worry if you go too fast, but if I am going too fast, then just let me know. I just see we've got a comment there. Webinar. We've got another webinar on Friday. So we've decided to run 2 this week because there's some extra topics. So I was going to talk about this at the end, but we've got the Retail New Zealand Chief Executive on Friday on a webinar to obviously talk specifically about retailers. And then the following Tuesday, we're back again with Hospitality New Zealand. So we've got, so we're running 2 this week, just to clarify that. So hopefully that sorts that out. What was I going to say? All right, so I'll put my slides up. Hopefully this will work, and then we'll and I'll start going through them now. It's done it backwards again. Hang on. That one. No, oh, goodness sake. Apologies. PowerPoint gets confused. All right. Let's try sharing again. Where's the share? Share. Here we go. Share screen. I want that one. Oh, is it showing? Rachel, is it showing the what slide am I looking at?
It's the business support series, growing revenue.
No, it's on the wrong monitor. Yeah. All right.
Sorry, I've had camera issues. My camera's fallen down, so.
That's all right. We'll run with that. Technology, people.
So I'm going back on mute.
All right. Okay. Let's roll with it this way. Okay. All right. I should be able to make this work anyway. So I just got to remember you guys are looking at that one. All right. So we're going to talk about different ways to grow revenue. Before I get into it, this is obviously an enormous topic. We could be talking about, of course, about marketing, because marketing is a very important component to growing revenue. We could be talking about sales strategies, relationship sales, CRMs and things, but we're not going to be talking about that. Pricing, I touch on pricing a little bit at the end, but I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail about pricing either, mainly because the current environment is so uncertain and it's hard to know what to do with pricing. What else? Yeah, so look, I've tried to pull some slides which are really focused around innovation, creating new products and services, and some methodologies about how you go about doing that, and some things that you can perhaps take away and use. And look, this is going to cover a range, because we weren't sure whether we're going to have startups or even people wanting to start a new business because they haven't got perhaps a job anymore, or this is the right time to do it, or it could be you'd be a well-established business with lots of staff. So bear in mind, I've got a range of things in here just because I thought we'd have a diverse people watching. So apologies if there's a concept in here you think is a little simplistic. I thought I'd take this opportunity just to introduce FIRESTATION in a little bit more detail for those who don't know. So we're called a business growth centre. We are the only one across the Central North Island in that we operate pretty much every town and have done so over the last 5 years. We've got relationships with most of the economic development agencies, including, of course, your very own SWIFT. And we've got a range of coaches and different facilitators that we draw on to deliver our programs and coaching. We have a vision and a purpose. Now, these are two things I actually would argue that as an organisation, this is a good time to go back and revisit. In fact, I'm doing this with two clients at the moment, both in professional services. So I do need to acknowledge that they haven't been as impacted as heavily, say, as those in retail or hospitality, but it is a good time to go back and rethink and reset pretty much everything that we do. And if you haven't thought about my vision or where I want to take my business over the next few years, or what is my purpose, why do I get out of bed in the morning, this is a good time to do that. And it's no different for us as well. It's also a good time to revisit your values. In other words, the things that should describe the behaviors that you exhibit within your businesses and with your clients and suppliers and stakeholders. These things are the three things: values, vision, and a purpose are what I call a strategic foundation of any organization, and certainly any planning. And you need these in place before you do anything else, because there's a risk, for instance, that if you set off in a direction or take your business in a direction and it's not in line with your vision or even your values, then there's going to be conflict, and it's going to cause issues on the way through. So again, these things I think are really, really important. They are sort of intangible. They're not easy to work out on your own, but it certainly is possible. And so everything does rest upon these things. Oh, this is just a quick slide on us, and we've basically worked with hundreds of businesses from startup through to large businesses. Our largest client turns over $24 million a year, employs 100 people. So we've got heaps of experience in this stuff, and we really, really enjoy what we do. And if you're wondering, that is our actual revenue curve in the background. But I was updating this yesterday, and it's taken a downward turn. So we were sitting on a revenue plateau up until now as a business, and I should have updated this morning, but I ran out of time. You can rest assured it has taken a significant dip. In fact, we've worked out that we've lost probably about $100,000 in revenue in confirmed and quoted work. And we've lost all of our co-working tenants in our co-working space in Rotorua as well. So we are in the same boat as a lot of other businesses. So this from now on, I've got a bunch of slides that are drawn from a range of different workshops that we deliver in our programs, whether it be new to business or existing businesses. It's going to feel a little bit like a pick and mix kind of thing, like a bit of a buffet. Like I've grabbed a few slides from here and a few slides from there. I've attempted to put them into an order, into a flow that hopefully makes a bit of sense, but it's going to feel like a bit like we're jumping around. And it's just because I was really trying to do something that wasn't long and overly complex, but has lots of practical tips that you can take away. And so the introduction is to 2 sections. This one is finding your edge, and I'll explain the edge piece in a moment. This is a graph that I've actually modified for this webinar, and it brings together a number of different ideas from a couple of different of our workshops. But it's essentially the red. Actually, you can't see my mouse. Oh, you can probably see my mouse over here. Anyway, the red curve is your standard sort of revenue S curve. And in our business, of course, as you would have seen, and I said, we're very much stuck on the plateau, and that's incredibly common. It's very difficult in business to know when your revenue is starting to plateau, and you tend to put it down to all sorts of different things, timing, economy. We blame all these external factors without really going back and starting to say, you know what, how do I reignite that next, jump up the curve? And ideally, we would be doing that when we're flat out, when we're busy, and just when we can just see revenue starting to slow. But the challenge is when that's happening, we are flat out, we are busy, and as I said, we put it down to other factors, and so we inevitably end up on this plateau. Of course, the challenge we've got in the COVID environment is I've put that grey downward line in. There's a risk, and well, not a risk, it is happening, that our businesses are declining, are going backwards, and that is without question outside of our control. It's not every business. Some businesses have simply slowed a bit. In fact, I had one firm in professional services comment to me that they feel that they were insanely busy and they were flat out trying to recruit people for COVID, and now the workload is acceptable. But as a business owner, I would be worried, how long is that going to go on for? Anyway. There's a couple of other concepts in here. One is the 3 a.m. ceiling. In short, that is my version of when you simply run out of time as a business owner from doing everything yourself. And it's very common, and a lot of us, I had the same issue as well. When we start out in the early days, we do a lot of everything ourselves, and we're not employing people. Then we start to employ people, but we still hold on to a lot of things. But we run out of time, and that's what the 3 a.m. ceiling recognizes that you just either have to work till 3 o'clock in the morning or get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to start work. It's the only way to get through your workload, but inevitably it's a ceiling, and the only way to work through it, of course, is to recruit other people or look at things like automation or simplifying processes or combinations of all those things. So no matter where you're on this curve, we're going to be talking about how to potentially keep growing, or at the very least, maybe not shrink. Simon Sinek. So if you haven't heard of Simon Sinek, he describes himself as a management philosopher, and he is most famous for his Start With Why, which is a book and a very good TED Talk. And the concept in a nutshell is that every organization, rather than thinking about and marketing what they do or even how they do it, we should all start with why. Why does our organization exist? And I put this in here because we go through this in every one of our programs, but in every one-on-one coaching program as well. But it's even more important now is to go back to what is it? What was the reason that you started this business, you bought this business, or bought into the business, or whatever it is? Why? What was the driver? What was the motivation? And one of the things I hear a lot is, that I started this childcare centre, for instance, because I love working with children. But all I do is spend all my time on the admin. I never get any time to spend with the children. Or I've started this gym and I love taking spin classes. But I can't remember the last time I took a spin class. In fact, I never get to really interact with the customers because all I spend my time doing is admin and working in the business. And so this happens a lot. And so it's really important to remind ourselves regularly why we start these, why we run and own these businesses, why we're involved in these organizations, and make sure that our time is allocated in a way that reinforces that for us. So it might be taking a spin class once a fortnight. It might be spending one afternoon a week, with a group of children. Whatever it is. No matter how big, we've grown, I've always wanted to do this. And if I couldn't do this, I wouldn't be happy. Which actually leads me to my next concept, which is ikigai. And some of you might have heard of it. I know Rebecca's just perked up. I just saw her look at the camera. Ikigai, yeah. Darren's talking about ikigai again. So this is a Japanese concept, and it relates really well to Simon Sinek's Start With Why, in the sense of this is the intersection of 4 different areas of your life. What you love doing, what you're good at, what the world needs, and arguably most important, what I can get paid for. Now, if your business and what you do in your business is in the ikigai, in the intersection, in the sweet spot of those 4 areas, then you truly you're not working. You're actually doing what you love, what you're good at, and you're being paid for it. And there is no greater feeling when you find this. It is just phenomenal. In fact, this is actually a really good template to work with employees as well, particularly if some are unhappy in their current role. Now, there is an exception to this in terms of people who volunteer in non-profits. I don't want to get into that, but they don't obviously get paid for what they do, but they do tick all those other boxes. So for the rest of us who need to generate revenue, we need to get paid. So it's a high level concept. There's a great book I found on this as well. Look, you can just Google it. There's a Wikipedia page on it as well. And but when you find it, it's just phenomenal, and it is for me. Now, one thing I will explain one interpretation of this. So if you're doing something you're good at, something the world needs, and you get paid for it, but you don't love it, that can feel really unfulfilling. And there's something that there's a service that we offer within our business that absolutely ticks 3 of those boxes, but not the top one. And I offer it to clients from time to time because it's something I am good at, and they need it, and they can pay, and they will pay for it. But I don't enjoy doing it at all. So we don't promote it, and I will avoid doing it if I can, sort of thing. So that's the important point, is that if you tend to compromise, then it's not going to work as well as when if you have all 4 things intersecting. Anyway, I've just realized I can't see the chat. Let's chat. There we go. All right. So just shout out if I'm going too fast, or if you've got any questions on any of this stuff. Okay. Oh, this is the old SWOT analysis. I threw this in because if we're doing any planning, and we should be doing planning for planning for growth, planning for a business to survive, planning to whatever it is, a SWOT analysis is really good. And in particularly, it's our strengths, right? Our strengths are the things by definition that we are good at. And if we have strengths that are unique, then they are our points of difference. And if we're going to invest our scarce time, energy, and money and resources into working on our business and growing parts of it, then why wouldn't we work on our strengths? In fact, there's a body of research which suggests that you get more bang for your buck by investing in your strengths rather than your weaknesses. Doesn't mean that you ignore your weaknesses, because if you ignore them, then there's a risk they turn into systemic threats. But you just do enough to shore them up, and so that you can focus the majority of your time on your strengths. So what is your business really good at? What do your customers tell you you're good at? Why do they buy from you? And what's always intriguing about this is that why we think our customers buy from us is quite different than why they do, why they actually do. And you don't know that until you go and talk to them and ask them. And I've got lots of examples, and no, I haven't got time to give them. But anyway, the good old SWOT analysis. Okay, Now, just to keep throwing different frameworks at you, this is the Lean Business Model Canvas. They give this out in Startup Weekend. For those who don't know what Startup Weekend, it's 54 hours of blood, sweat, and tears. You turn up on a Friday night with an idea for a business or a business model. By the Sunday evening, you are pitching it to a panel of judges. And along the way, you need to do all the things. You need to build a plan. You need to maybe create a prototype, validate your market, all those sort of things. But one of the things they do, the organizers do, is they give out this canvas, this framework at the start of the weekend, and it's a nice summary of everything that you have to do. Now, a lot of the words are very tiny, and even when I throw this up on the wall, normally it's really hard to read. But I put this in here because it can be a really good way of sitting back. And I know for some businesses, particularly those who are struggling pre-COVID, and now this is really could be the death knell, going right back to basics, back to square one and saying, what is the model of my business? How do I do what I do, and how could I do it differently? And this is a really good way and a really good framework to break your business model down into those different components. If you want to find more, you can just Google Lean Business Model Canvas, and in fact, you just put in your email address, and they'll provide you with this template, and there's suggestions on how to fill it in, and you'll find examples, using Mr. Googly on how other people have used it. So you can do it with your team, you can do it with yourself. I think it's a nice. In fact, this filling this in, for instance, could be your plan for the future. This could be a business plan at the end of the day. So that's the business. I'm not going to go through it in detail because we haven't got time for that today. But that's the Lean Business Model Canvas. Okay, what else have we got now? When it comes to thinking about how do I grow, how do I create new products and services? Obviously, we need to get creative. And it's very hard to be creative when you're running in your business from thing to thing to thing. We're firefighting, we're reacting to events. We're focused often on the short term, and it's very hard to step back and find the breathing room to be creative. But that's exactly what needs to happen. We need to find a way to lock ourselves where we can't be distracted and to spend time doing things that are going to put us in a creative mind. Now it could be that you've already found that. It could be that doing a very routine, mundane task on a weekend puts you in the zone to think of things, or doing going for a run or doing something. There's a tip there: get active on there. So this is I usually have 3 slides of this, and I just grabbed a handful and put them on here. But all of these, I think, will help put you in that creative mind. But you've got to have the freedom. You've got to create the time, and it needs to be done on a regular basis. And I actually just challenged a new client to do this. And they said, I need to be working on my business. And so I'm going to put some time on this Thursday. And I said, right, every Thursday, go on your calendar right now, carve out the time, figure out a way to hold yourself accountable for doing it. But that's the time you're creative. You cannot be creative when you're flat out. It doesn't work. Now, there's no doubt a certain level of stress. You can have epiphanies and figure things out. There's no doubt about that. But overall, I think if we really want to be creative and we want to come up with new ways of doing what we do, then we've got to create the time and think about some of these other things. Changing our surroundings. Getting outside, getting active. All of these things, I think can help. Oh, now reverse brainstorm is so your traditional brainstorm is you start on the middle with like a mind map, and then you just go crazy and you draw connections between ideas as they come to you. A reverse brainstorm is one way I heard this described is that you start at the bottom with what you want, and then you put all your resources that you have at the top, and then you try and draw connections between those two things. So it's also called, I think, a brain swarm as well. So It's just trying to, it's just trying to get your brain to think differently. It's like a version of backward planning, where you, rather than planning forward like we often do, you start with your end goal, and then you go back and you say, okay, so 6 months prior to that, or a year prior to that, where do I need to be in order to achieve that end goal? Okay, so if that's at that point, where do I need to be 6 months prior to that to get to there? And then so forth, and you work your way back to where you are today. And by doing that, it can be a really good check on whether things are possible based on what you've got in terms of resources or capabilities to achieve that end goal. What else we got? Okay, so let's get into some different ways of generating revenue. So these are quite high level and revolve around, I think some of these things are very common. So for instance, I've got on the asset sale, so very common. Can I sell a physical good? Now look, I know that seems blatantly obvious, but if you're typically a service provider, then the question is there a physical item that you could be selling alongside of your current offering or instead of your current offering? Look, I read an article yesterday. It was about a rafting company who have done a complete change of direction, or a complete pivot, as we call it. And they've decided to try and keep his employees occupied by creating planter boxes. So I think, and particularly those for walls or something like that. And you just think, what on earth has a rafting company got to do with, planter boxes? But the thing is, when they sat down with their employees and worked out what skill sets they had, there was a range of them, and they really lent themselves to this. And so they thought, okay, let's start making this physical item. So what I'm saying is, nothing is off the table, and that's really important to remember, that nothing is off the table. Usage fees. So can I generate more income or an income stream from a service when I normally, say, deliver a product, a physical product? So if you think about, a car dealership, yes, they generate revenue by selling cars, but there's a significant portion of their overall revenue that comes from servicing and maintenance and parts. Also, but I'm talking about a service here. So, so is there something that you do that you don't normally charge for, but perhaps you could with a bit of changing? Subscription fees. The notion that people will be willing to pay an ongoing and often forget about it fee for a service. So could you create a membership around what you do? Create something, a unique part of your offering that's closed to those who are already customers or could become members in some way and are willing to pay you a regular amount. And obviously, your examples are normally around that monthly, but it doesn't have to be monthly. It could be quarterly or annually. But of course, monthly it can break it down to a small amount, and then often it's not necessarily noticed when it goes out. Lending, leasing, renting. So do you have assets in your business that you could rent out rather than sell? Or is there things that, is there something that you've got? Is there a part of your premises that you could lease out? Are there things that you have that you normally use but are sitting idle? Could you lease them out? Could you rent them out? Whatever it is. There's a growing, it's called the sharing economy, and it's obviously just getting bigger and bigger. And people are even willing to rent out their cars now. I wouldn't do that, but it's a thing. All right, what else have we got? Licensing. So you might have created some intellectual property. You might have got a proprietary system or process in your business, and it could be possible to license that out to other people. And there's lots of examples of that. Brokerage fees. Now, obviously, auction houses and, the likes of Trade Me are examples of this, where you act as an intermediary between the buyer and seller. But it is possible to do that in other ways. And in our business, it's something I've been working on for actually the last year, and it's taken a while and it will come, but where I'm looking at helping those who need to raise capital and connecting those with those who have investment money, basically. And yes, there's angel investment clubs, and there's other ways of doing this, like crowdfunding But I think there's an opportunity for startups and small businesses and non-profits to access capital that normally couldn't do via other means. And so naturally, of course, if we're going to provide a service like that, there'll be some sort of fee charged to provide the service. Advertising. People are willing to put their logo, put their brand on almost anything these days. It's amazing, and there's again lots of examples of this. But is there a way that maybe you've got street frontage, which lends itself to advertising? Perhaps you've got a product which is out on the road all the time. Could people put their brand on that? Whatever. It's everything is up for discussion. So those are just some high level different ways of generating revenue. Now, I'm about to sort of go through a very quick overview of something called Edge Strategy. This is the book that it's based on. We teach this particularly in our Accelerate program for medium-sized businesses, but I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of it. So, and the authors basically break the edges down into product, journey, enterprise. And when they say edges, what they're talking about is, rather than, say you've got a core competency in your business, so you do something, you do it very well, and you can charge accordingly for that. And then sometimes we decide to expand our offering in a completely new direction in a way that we've never really done before, and we've got no experience. And there's something called the blue ocean strategy, which lends itself to this, which is okay. The challenge though is, if you haven't got deep pockets, you can waste a lot of time and money going off in that new direction. Whereas an alternative view is to look at the edges of your competencies and say, okay, based on what we do well, what could we extend that to cover, but in a way that our existing customers go, yeah, these guys are good at that. It makes sense. I want a piece more of what else they're doing. So I will go through this in a bit, the product edges in a bit more detail. The journey edge, that's thinking about the lifetime your customers are with you. Now that could be very quick, because it could be largely a transactional thing. Somebody comes in for a haircut and then they leave again. But the journey edge asks the question, how do we extend their time with us? What else would they be willing to pay for before they normally arrive and when they normally leave? How can I extend our offering in either direction? So for our business, it's about saying we want to work with a business. How do we start working with them earlier on their journey with us, and then and later on? So that's by creating new products and services, well, I guess what's an example? So if you're selling food items, extending the journey would be to create, say, pre-prepared meals that people could take away with them. So rather than just coming in and shopping for the ingredients for meals, they actually buy a pre-prepared meal sort of thing. Or you could even take one step further, and you could buy meals that people could have on site as well. So it's those sort of things. How do I keep the customer for longer? Enterprise edges, that's looking at how you do what you do and saying, is there something in my waste stream? Is there data that I collect that I could anonymize and then on sell? Those sort of things. But anyway, the product edges are probably the easiest to think about. So things like convenience. And a long time ago, I was taught that convenience is one of the three things that you should sell on: time, money, and convenience. So can you make it more convenient for your customer in some way? And there's a really neat example there, obviously, of rental car companies offering the prepaid fuel. So rather than trying to find a petrol station before you need to drop it off, you just drop it off whatever level the tank's at, and they'll top it up. Of course, they charge you for the privilege, but it makes your life more convenient. Comfort, can you make it more enjoyable with you? And are people willing to spend that extra money? Possibly my Air New Zealand example is probably not a great one at the moment. But if there's a part of what you do that's not as enjoyable as other parts, then there's anything you can add on to enhance that, people might be willing to pay extra for. relief, pain points. So whatever you do, whatever you sell, there's inevitably parts of the process that there's, it's difficult to know where to, click and collect can be painful, for times, but perhaps it's more convenient. It's easier than going in and wandering around a supermarket sort of thing, obviously, particularly at the moment, or, even delivery of items. So it's thinking about, this requires talking to your customers and getting feedback on what parts of my process cause you grief, that are difficult, and how do I make it easier for you. Peace of mind, so anything that reduces anxiety. This is quite often, as it says there, with warranties, extended warranties. If you spend a lot of money on whiteware or lawnmower or something like that, it's anything that you can do and offer your customer they might be willing to pay extra for, to assure them that you'll be there to support them. It could be even, offering somebody the opportunity to learn more about the product and to be able to use it more effectively and efficiently. And usually there's a nice sales argument to that, because if you show someone how to use clean and maintain their lawnmower, it's going to last them for longer and it's going to extend the life of their product, kind of thing. Passion, anything that enhances the experience. And now obviously at the moment a lot of events are not possible, and it's very hard to create an awesome experience when we can't get people together, but hopefully in level 2 we'll be able to start doing that again. So anything that expands the experience. And for us, for instance, that might be organizing a trip to another city to hear an inspirational speaker, coming from overseas. So we take care of all the organization. We book the hotels, we take care of all the restaurant bookings, we organize the seating, everything. We take care of everything that you've just basically got to turn up, and we've sorted all that out for you. And of course there's a cost involved to do that. Knowledge, and I already kind of touched on this a little bit, but any way that you can educate your customers is massive, and I think can be a huge differentiator. Not lecturing them, but actually sharing the things that you know. And it's a really good way to set yourself apart from your competition and highlight your credibility and expertise. So it's taking what you know and bundling it up. So another example of this is I was talking to a florist about, she wants to start a flower school. So teaching people at home, flower arranging, drying flowers, things like that. So she's already got the knowledge. She's already offering the service to people who just want to walk in and grab something and go, or pre-arrange something. But actually teaching this knowledge. So those are the kind of the 6 product edges from Edge Strategy. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? All right. Oh, it's taking longer than I thought it would. Anyway, okay. So in our final section, I'm going to just go through a couple of ways you can think about, once you've got some ideas for products and services, how do you get them to market? That's probably the question there. How do I get that to market? How do I know customers are going to want it? And then I'm also going to close on this with a little bit around thinking about costing and pricing. So this is kind of the gold standard in this stuff, the lean startup. Again, you see it's lean again. Lean's really everywhere at the moment. This book has been out for some time, but it's got a really neat process, and it's written by a guy who's an engineer. So it's very methodical, his process, but I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of it. And it kind of looks like this. He calls this the feedback loop. And basically, it's a loop because it's continuous. And the reason why it's continuous is often we think, I've got a new product or service, or I've got a product or service, and I know people are buying it. Oh, I'm done. Now it's just a matter of spreading the word. Well, that's not the case. We need to have a product pipeline. We need to be constantly innovating, constantly refining our existing, and thinking about new products and services, because your competition is not going to sit still, and certainly the environment within we operate, is constantly changing, and obviously right now is an example of that. The environment has drastically changed. And so the way this works is it starts with ideas. Obviously you come up with an idea, and we talked about ways to be creative. You then build a potential solution. You launch it to market, and I'll put MVP on it, and I'm going to come to that in a subsequent slide. That stands for minimum viable prototype or product. You launch it. You then measure the impact. And I'm not just talking about revenue, right? That is a measure, but it is not the only measure. And so by doing that, you're capturing all sorts of different kinds of data. And in the book, he talks about something called innovation accounting. In other words, what are the metrics that I can monitor and measure and capture that tell me if my business is going to grow and is going to continue to grow, and particularly at an accelerating rate. So it can be social media metrics like followers. It can be things like measuring customer satisfaction, like through something called Net Promoter Score. It could be physical units shipped. I mean, it could be numbers of warranty claim. Whatever. There's a whole range of data that we should be measuring, and then we use that data to learn, and so that we can evolve our ideas and refine them. And then build an amended solution, and then launch that again to market. So it's this continual circle. We go round and round and round. And as it says in the middle there, one of the central concepts is that we need to minimize the total time taken. So the faster we can move through that loop, the quicker we get our new evolved product to market, the sooner we can get our feedback, and the sooner we can evolve it and change it and then move on, sort of thing. It's as fast as we possibly can. So that in a very short, succinct way is kind of the lean startup in a nutshell. Now, what's closely related to this is this thing called the innovator's method. And as you'll see on the cover of this book, it says called Bringing a Lean Startup into Your Organization. So it's quite neat. These different authors sort of leverage off each other's work methodology. So in the innovator's method, they talk about 4 steps. You go through insight, problem, solution, business model, scale it. So it's kind of a slightly higher level than the lean startup. But I want to talk about the MVP part. So when we are building a solution, what we think our customer wants, we can think about it in the concept of a theoretical prototype, i.e. it's just words on a page. This is what I think, or sketched out on a whiteboard. The virtual prototype is then when we take that and we turn it into something that people can potentially visualize. So if you're in engineering, it's taking a concept and turning it into a 3D sort of AutoCAD or CAD drawing. The draftsman, it can be anything which looks like the end product and allows people to sort of get their head around it. And then the next sort of stage is the MVP, the minimum viable. This is taking my prototype and turning it into something that allows a customer to say yes in the shortest, least expensive, least amount of resources, fastest way possible. And example of that could be, in our business, we might go and pitch. Here we go, the webinars, right? So we pitched these webinars to the council and Swift, but I had a concept, and then we sort of kind of fleshed it out a bit. You could argue it was sort of a virtual prototype, and then we gave them, this is our MVP. This is how we think it's going to work, and that was enough for them to say yes. We had no content, we had no marketing, we had really no way of knowing, apart from other organizations running similar things. We didn't know if customers, people were going to dial into these. So we kind of, there was a lot of assumptions built into this, but it was enough for them to say, yes, get on with it. And when customers do that, they're usually buying your brand. They're buying a perception that you can deliver a great product or service. And that's the MVP. So it's the opposite of thinking up a brand new product or service, then spending a lot of time and money and energy creating something, refining it, then launching it to market and figuring out that actually, you know, people don't want that, or maybe they want a different part of it, and I have to go back to the drawing board, and I've just wasted all that time. It's answering the question, what is the minimalist thing that I can launch that will allow someone to say yes? And it can be as simple as marketing something as a flyer for a new product or service, taking deposits and saying, if you want this, we're going to deliver it in 3 months. We're taking 25, 50% deposits right now. You'll be the first 100 people to have this thing, you know, blah, blah, blah. And when people start paying that deposit, you know you have an MVP. And then you can go on and start building the, you know, that minimum awesome product, you know, something that's going to, you know, blow them out of the water. And essentially, this is where Kickstarter comes from. You know, Kickstarter campaigns are all about, hey, I've got a prototype of something. I need cash to build it. You know, give me money, and you'll be one of the first to own it, or I'll send you a free mug or something, or whatever it is. You know, but it absolutely works. It's incredible to me, after all the years I've been doing this, is that how little you need to convince people to say yes to something. You know, and obviously that's unfortunately a lot of fraud happens, but you know, it's no doubt if you deliver something, then yeah, you're going to blow their socks off, and really they only buy on two things, you know, two main things that convince people to say yes. Anyway, so that is the innovators method in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. You get into insights and, you know, design thinking, and there's a lot of other things in there, but that's kind of the MVP was the main point I wanted to get across. And that slots back into the obviously into that feedback loop that I talked about in the Lean Startup. Now, when we're thinking up ideas, and we can think up a lot of ideas, and a lot of them might have some merit, it can be difficult to decide, what do I pursue? How do I know that this is going to be worth my while? So I sort of created this simple two-dimensional way of kind of figuring out where it is. So the idea is you plot your potential new products and services on these two areas, in one of these two dimensions. So one is and it's obviously you're speculating, what is the potential revenue impact for my business? Is this going to add, you know, 5 or 10% to my revenue, or is this going to potentially add 50%? You know, so what's the revenue impact? And then how much is this going to cost? What sort of difficulty is involved in making this a reality, you know, kind of thing. So if you, let's see, to work our way through it. So if you've got something that's low revenue and low difficulty or cost, then really I would argue that's just business as usual. That's just maybe a refinement of an existing product or service, or it's just an add-on or something like that. If you've got something that's highly difficult, low revenue, well then, you know, that would go to the bottom of the priority list. If you've got something that's highly difficult, but are going to have a high potential revenue impact, the question is, can I simplify it? Can I strip out some of that difficulty and cost in a way that's not going to materially impact on the revenue? Maybe I could take out half the cost, but I could get, say, 80% of the revenue, you know. So can I simplify it? Because often business owners are perfectionists, and we think we need to deliver a perfect product or service, and realize something that's only sort of 80% as good will be accepted by customers. And which again comes back to that MVP. And then of course the last one is, if it lands in the high revenue, low difficulty, you just get on with it, right? That's obviously those are the revenue opportunities that we want to chase. And you could do a third overlay in terms of, sometimes you could take out the cost and make these in terms of the bubbles to recognize the cost impact, but you know, not want to make things too complicated, you know. So we're looking for the ratio of high revenue to low difficulty. And I know it seems obvious, and even when you map these things, often you go, you know what, I kind of knew that intuitively, but at least you've made some sort of assessment. And this could be on a scale thing. You could scale it from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 and use that to, you know, do your plotting. There is another step beyond this where you come up with a range of factors beyond 2. It could be half a dozen different factors, and they're all on a rating of 1 to 10, and then you go an assessment process, and you get up with a weighted average, and it's all very complicated. But anyway, so anyway, that's the easy way to think about it. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is when we launch something new to market, we need to be really clear about our go-to-market strategy. In other words, how do my customers or potential customers discover, evaluate, purchase, and use? Because what it's tempting to do is it's tempting to think about it as a transaction. I just need to move this and make some money. But every customer should be thought of as a relationship. Every sale should be thought about as a relationship sale. And so we need to think about, how do they find out about us? So that's the discover part. How do they find us online? How do I advertise? All that sort of thing. How do people recommend us? Whatever. How do they evaluate us? Because even the most digital or online offering, people still need to make some assessment of whether this is right for me. And usually, of course, this is through testimonials. And you could operate, you could have those on your website, or you could use an independent-based system, whatever. But it's amazing how much complete strangers are willing to listen to each other in terms of evaluating a product. The purchase, I already touched on, making purchasing easy. And then the use. Can you support your customers in the use of their product so they know that you're there all the way through their journey with you? And I think that's really critical. This is what's called a validation board. It's a way of thinking about how to validate your product service. I'm not going to go through this in detail. Again, this is one of these things you can just download for yourself. There's a website there, validationboard.com. It highlights a couple of things. First of all, it highlights the fact that you need to get out of the building. In other words, that when we validate things, we need to go and talk to our prospective customers. We need to ask them the questions, and we need to look for those buying signals. Not, do you think this is a good idea? And the other thing is that there's the notion of pivoting, and that it's inevitable that we're going to change direction, that no matter what we launch, it's going to have to be refined or changed. Maybe not straight away, but it's certainly at some point. It might be a response to competition, or it could be a response to customer feedback, whatever it is. Pivots are an inevitable part of the process, and we need to accept that and be ready for them. And so pivot just means change of direction. The other thing I like about this is it talks about validation as a hypothesis. In other words, there's kind of a scientific methodology to being in business. And really it kind of works like, my hypothesis is that if I create this product or service at this price point and deliver it in this way, my customers will purchase it, and they'll purchase it at this volumes. And then you simply test it. You test your hypothesis, and you refine it as based on what happens with your experiment. And that's kind of I think it's quite a neat way to look at being in business. It's just all about testing your hypothesis. Oh, and I just see a comment there. Yes, it's also my experience. People will buy into a pitch concept, but you have to deliver. Absolutely. You have to deliver. Word of mouth is still the most important thing in any business. And if you don't deliver on what you promise, then word gets around. And every business is dependent on word of mouth. In fact, I come to this in a moment. You're right. It's absolutely huge. Yeah, delivery is everything. Oh yes, just a couple of slides on this. So this one is talking about churn rate. So this is one of the metrics that you might want to think about, is particularly if you're in a relationship-based business. Think about it. Say if you're a gymnasium and people sign up and they become members of your gym, then it's all about the churn rate, And if you're a telco, then this is one of these things you obsess about. I mean, everyone obsesses about this. I obsess about churn rate, and the objective here is that your rate of new acquisition must exceed your loss of the rate at which you're losing customers, or your churn rate. And so that's, I know it sounds like just common sense, but what we tend to do sometimes is focus too much on the new customer piece, and forget about looking after our existing customers. Because if we're losing existing customers faster than we're winning new ones, then of course we're just going to go backwards. So it's a metric. And then the other one is something called the viral coefficient. Now this is out of the Lean Startup book, and he talks about these viral coefficients. So 0.1 means, as it says there, 1 in every 10 customers will recruit 1 additional person, and that's not sustainable. You want ideally a coefficient of greater than 1. So in other words, every customer will bring at least another customer to you, sort of, if not more. And obviously the higher that coefficient, if it's 2, then it's 1 customer will bring another 2 customers. And that's just gold. And again, you can do things, you can measure this, you can do things to enhance it. And it's, it's nothing more complex than Sky does it all the time. You're a Sky TV subscriber, and they say, bring a friend and we'll give you a month or 3 months or whatever it is, sort of thing. Yeah, so this is all about launching, and you're up and running, and thinking about the measuring, how do I grow this? So now I'm just going to end with a couple of slides around some numbers stuff. So this is from one of our finance workshops. And I put this in here as this morning because I was just thinking about it. One of the things that's important to understand is my cost structure. And I'm spending a lot of time with clients, a huge amount of time with clients, understanding their financial position and their forecasting beyond it. So as part of that, we need to understand, realistically, what is our gross profit, and particularly what is our gross profit margin. In other words, how much money do I have left over after paying my direct costs, and how much money do I have left over to cover my overheads? So direct costs are any costs that move in line with my sales. And I've spent some time with a range of businesses working this out. Taking all their expenses and putting them into one of 2 camps. One is direct costs. How do these move in line with my sales? So in other words, sales commissions is a big one, obviously. If you don't sell, you don't pay commission. So therefore it's a pure direct cost. Or in a manufacturing business, it could be electricity. If I don't sell, I'm not producing, therefore I'm not using electricity. And then in the other camp is all of my indirect costs, my overheads, things that don't move in line with my sales typically. So insurance, my lease, things like that. And so, but it's not just at the business level working this out, it's also at a customer level and a job level. And I think that's really important. If we can figure out what is my margin on that customer, what is that margin on that job, and particularly when we price a job and then we do a job. So I've been working with a scaffolding business. It's great that they do really good quoting, and they spend a lot of time in their quoting. But then what happens after they do the job? Do they actually measure how much time was spent on that job? Because it's all labor. Pretty much, it's all the cost is labor, and therefore. Was that job worthwhile? What can I learn from that job? It could be that your biggest customer from a headline revenue standpoint does not generate the most margin for your business. And so these are some of the questions I think it's worth particularly asking at the moment, because we are under a lot of pressure, and there's no point investing our time and energy keeping low margin clients when we should be investing our time in keeping and winning high margin clients. And that might mean a complete structural change to your business. It might mean that it does actually need to shrink and consolidate. It might need to fundamentally change. Which kind of leads me, and then there's also break-even sales. So once you've worked out your gross margin, you can do a very simple calculation where you take a overhead or all your overheads, and you divide that by your gross margin, and then that will tell you how much sales you need to cover that one overhead or all of your overheads. So for instance, if you're about to put a new cost into your business, so it's a new person, it comes a new salary, you take the salary and you divide it by the gross margin, and that will tell you how much new sales you need to generate just enough money, just enough gross profit to cover that new salary in your business. Or again, you could do it at a business level. And again, this is a really eye-opening exercise when you've never actually sat down and taken your overheads and divided it by and you've got to make sure your gross margin is accurate, and then work out, oh, that's how much business I need, not just annually, but divide it by, work it out monthly, weekly, maybe even daily, to keep, just to keep the lights on. And I had another point on this, and I've forgotten it. There was something around margin and profit. Anyway, I've missed it. All right. Oh, and just a bit on pricing, and then I promise I'm going to stop talking because I'm going way over time. This is what I'm going to talk about. Cost per acquisition and cost to serve. So if we're spending time working out our margin on a per customer basis, it is worth thinking about what is my cost to acquire every new customer and what is my cost to serve them, because often they're not explicitly calculated. So acquisition cost is usually a time that it takes to win a new customer, and it's not explicitly calculated because we don't track it. But, if somebody walks in the door to our store, or somebody calls us up saying, I want some coaching, we've got to win that customer. And it takes often time to do that. It may require them even demoing your product, taking it away. That all has cost implications. And the same thing with cost to serve. Once we've won them as a customer, we need to look after them. And some customers cost us a lot more than others. You have high maintenance customers and you have low maintenance customers, and they have a different cost structure. So again, it's worth thinking about, is there a way that I can quantify that cost to look after that customer? Because it may be, once you've worked it out, there's a negative gross margin. In fact, and this is the point of the slide, is that when you've got a entry level offering, and if it's not priced appropriately, you can very easily end up with negative gross margin. In other words, it costs your business money to deliver this low cost offering. And as soon as you ditch it, then your bottom line is going to benefit, and it's going to reduce your costs, obviously as a consequence. So, and then the last one I've got is there's lots of stuff around pricing, and we spend a lot of time on the psychology of pricing, but nothing beats an improvement than a 1% increase in price. Now, in the current environment, this is something you'd have to think very, very carefully about. And I always argue all pricing should be strategic in nature and should be carefully thought through. But it could be that if your product or service is still in demand, depending on what there's a concept in economics around the elasticity of demand. But putting aside that, it could be a 1% price increase is not going to be noticed. So if we are charging $100, more than likely $101 is not going to stop anyone from buying your product. It's not sufficiently a barrier. In fact, the psychology suggests in normal times, and I just want to emphasize that, normal times, you can get away with up to a 9% increase in price and it will be accepted. Basically, single-digit percentage increase in price will be accepted or not even noticed, but we're not in normal times. So I'm just saying, if you've got something that people are demanding, it may be possible, and this is where experiments is important. Don't do it across everything you offer. Maybe test one product or service, test it in one market, and just see what the impact is. It may be possible to increase your price. And that's it. That's kind of everything I could kind of think of without going into a whole bunch of other things around how to grow your revenue. So I'll just open up to any sort of final questions or comments or thoughts. I'll take a sip because I'm thirsty. All right. Well, thank you for bearing with me. I was hoping to do that in under an hour, and I haven't. So I'll need to do some work on that. we will share the video for this as we normally do, and it'll be on with all the others. I'll make sure some of the slides are going to be available on our website. Rachel, are you still there? She might have disappeared. Oh, yes, she's still there. There we are. So, Rach, with the slides from today, how do we make sure people can access those?
Probably the best thing would be off our website, the FIRESTATION.nz, and I will put them on the post. So if you go into the training tab, it'll be on the post for this webinar.
Cool. All right. Or the other thing is just become a customer, and then I can give them to you directly. You know, there we go. Is that a subtle plug? Was that too subtle? No, not subtle enough.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. I was reading some comments.
All right. Well, look, I'll just finish by saying I've kind of come to the awareness. There's kind of three groups of business owners at the moment. You've got those who have their head firmly buried in the sand and don't want to know, and there might have been their business was failing before COVID, and this is kind of the death knell, and they're just like, oh, I don't want to talk to my landlord, I don't want to deal with anything, I just don't. And then you've got another camp who's like, yeah, I probably don't need to change anything, I'm just going to wait till level 2 or 1 or whatever, and I'll just go back and, we'll probably have a recession, but I'll be subdued, but I won't do anything different. And then you've got the other camp, and then probably the one, and you are probably on this camp because you're on this call, but you are the ones that say, you know what, there's an opportunity. Like, my business might be completely devastated or it's severely impacted, but somewhere in here, there's an opportunity. I can see a way to change direction, or there are things I was thinking of doing, and now's a really good time just to get on with them. This is the kick in the pants I needed. It's hard, it's tough, but I will come through this. This is a temporary situation, and I'm going to make my business even stronger and better than it was going into it. And look, it's not easy, but I'm hoping that that's where we put ourselves in this camp, and hopefully you will too. So thanks for sticking with me. And we're back on Friday. That's my little note, aren't we? Friday for retail at 10, and next Tuesday we've got the hospitality in New Zealand next Tuesday at 10 as well. So yeah, no doubt there'll be emails about that stuff. Very good. All right. Thank you very much.